good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sharon. I work in the student recruitment team at Liverpool John Moores University, and I'm delighted to host this session today for you. It's one of our lightning lunchtime sessions, and today we're focusing more on drama, musical theatre, and I'll introduce my colleague shortly, who's going to take you through this 30-minute session today. Before I do that, however, just to give you a bit more information about today's session. Obviously, we're holding a webinar. It's a live session today, but obviously you may also be watching this as a recording. So you're very welcome, no matter how you're watching this, online, live, or as I say, as a recorded session. We're using Zoom, so that means today, sit back and relax. We can't see you. You can ask us lots of questions. We can't hear you either. The way you can ask us questions and communicate with us, if you are watching this live, is by using the Q&A button on screen. So if you want to ask any questions throughout, and then we can pick those up at the end of this session. And as I say, it's 30 minutes. If you think of any questions later, or you're watching this as a recording, then please, by all means, do email us and use the address outreach@ljmu.ac.uk or courses@ljmu.ac.uk. Okay, so without any further ado, I'm now going to hand over to my colleague in the Screen School, Nick, who's going to take you through today's session. Thanks, Nick.
Great, thank you, Sharon. Sharon's going to be my lovely right-hand lady doing the clicking of the pages, since I'm not screen sharing at the minute. She is. Welcome to this. I'm Nick Phillips, Dr. Nick Phillips. I'm the head of the drama programs, which is the BA Musical Theatre and the BA Drama and Drama with other subjects, English and Creative Writing. This is a kind of a lightning lecture that is intended to give you a kind of flavour of some of the ways we think about some aspects of how we combine theory and practice, which are at the heart of all our programmes. And hopefully will be of use to you as staff or as students already studying in relation to unpicking some of the sort of key issues that always emerge when we start to talk about our discipline. So for today, I'm very interested in sort of talking about acting, because many of us come into our connection to theatre through taking part in work and performing. And are interested in the aspects of characterization and what that means, and how we play a character, or indeed whether or not we think we are being a character as we are acting. And to connect that to Stanislavski, who of course is a big, huge name in the study of our discipline, and an important one to understand, but often a misunderstood name and a misunderstood sort of background to his work, and in terms of how we might interpret and apply it today. So we have the next slide, Sharon, that would be great. That's a little picture, well, a little bit of visuals. On the left, there is Konstantin Stanislavski himself, and on the right is his partner in crime, if you like, Vladimir Nemirovich Danchenko, with whom he founded the Moscow Arts Theatre. We'd have the next slide, Sharon, that would be great. There we go. He is a big name, Konstantin Stanislavski. When I was a very young student, we always called him Stan the Man, and I've never really got away from that. So I think it's always worth tempering our understanding of Stanislavski with a little humor. He is significant. His key collaborators were, as I said, Nemirovich Danchenko, and of course Anton Chekhov, who was one of the writers they focused on and nurtured in the Moscow Arts Theatre, which was founded not until 1898, but the ideas behind it had been blossoming for, being nurtured for a fair while, and actually coincide with the rise of naturalism as a style, as a historical style in culture and the arts, and combined particularly in relation to acting with the growth of psychology as a science, and the fact that people were beginning to unpick about the motivations behind human behavior and things to do with backstory and all of that kind of stuff. So all of those things were merging together, and as a result, Mr. Stanislavski, very wisely, who was an actor and subsequently a director, wanted to go, there must be a better way of preparing and developing a way of preparing for performance rather than the one that was currently in place. And so he was determined to kind of try and work out what that might be. If we could have the next slide, please, Sharon. A quick, a very grainy picture of a production from just into the beginning of the 20th century of I think this is a bit of the cherry orchard. In fact, I'm sure it is. Quite an old picture, but what we see there is something that probably looks to us incredibly old-fashioned, but at the time would have seemed quite modern and avant-garde. If we could have the next picture, that would be great. Next slide, sorry. There we go. And really, this is the important bit, because what Stanislavski wanted to develop was a method for an actor's preparation and rehearsal. And he called it the system. And this is not to be confused with the later American adoption of his ideas, which became known as the method, particularly through the director Lee Strasberg and the teacher Lee Strasberg, but became widely adopted and in a way became the popularization of many of the things that Stanislavski was working on and writing about through the first, 2 or 3 decades of the 20th century. His key 2 books are An Actor Prepares and Building a Character. I think I remember learning about both the name Stanislavski and the book An Actor Prepares through friends that I made in the National Youth Theatre when I was 16 years old. I'd heard about him, I'd read about him before, but didn't really know anything about it. I never really got to read An Actor Prepares until, in fact, I was back at university when I was 22. And even then I found it quite a hard read. But nevertheless, there was a lot in it that chimed in some respects, and subsequently Building a Character added flesh to that. And he subsequently wrote 2 more well-known volumes, My Life in Art and Creating a Role, a lot later, sort of collation of bits and pieces. But what you discover as you look at Stanislavski's ideas and his developing writing is that he changed his mind. Like many of us as artists, we change our mind all the time, and often contradicts things we've espoused before, and so on. And he developed from trying to develop a sort of set system and a method into something that as he went on through later into his career, that was much more rooted in the ability to live in the moment and to find a level of spontaneity. And he began to utilize a lot of improvisation, all of which was very important to him, and made him realize there was something about the life of living theatre on stage, in a live performance that could only come out of being spontaneous in the moment. So none of his work is to be regarded as a kind of a Bible, and he certainly wouldn't have wanted that to be the case. And we often think, Stanislavski, there are 3 or 4 points and key phrases, which we'll come to in a moment, that we must have enshrined in the way that we think about theatre. There is as much reaction to his work as there is, people who espouse it and picked it up and developed it. And we should never forget that. Next slide, please, Sharon. Yes, and so he talked about, his system was talking about acting as the art of experiencing, and with which he contrasts to what he called the art of representation. And that's how he'd seen acting previous to this period. And what I would call his version, which he would establish as 3-dimensional characterization, as opposed to 2-dimensional kind of cutouts, archetypes, and very recognizable, sometimes stereotypes of characters within a lot of the drama that was coming in the previous 100, 150 years. And he wants the art of experiencing, therefore, to be an active and immersive process. And that's a very interesting word to describe it, because, of course, immersive theatre now is one of the big sort of ideas of our zeitgeist about how that connection between actor and audience can be reinterpreted in so many ways to make the immersion into the experience for the audience probably as huge as Stanislavski viewed it and wanted it for the actor. So that immersion demanded a way of getting into character and potentially getting out of character. Although it's interesting, we don't do anything like as much work on coming out of character after a performance as we do getting into character through a process. But getting into character is by its very nature somehow transporting, transforming, and potentially transgressive. In other words, it allows us to live out certain aspects of ourselves through our work as actors by living them out through other characters. And I think most actors will tell you there is an inevitability about something about that. We don't switch ourselves off when we go into acting. We become more alive than ever. The great actor Brent Carver, God rest his soul, who was a brilliant musical theatre actor actually, but certainly had a great quote subscribing to that very viewpoint. He said, "We become more alive than live here." And that having a system mobilizes the actor's conscious thought and will in order to activate other less controllable psychological processes, such as emotional experience and subconscious behavior, all of which are the stuff of psychology. sort of going, well, there are lots of things around that, but the actor needs to understand those things, but needs to be able to analyze and develop a conscious way of applying that in terms of revealing that through performance, revealing those subconscious behaviors and emotional experiences, and sympathetically and indirectly. But his idea of developing a system was an intention to make for much more reliability and consistency of process, and ultimately to make the actor's job, if you like, more respectable, more reliable. The next slide, please, Sharon. So he was expecting that in rehearsal, an actor will be searching for the inner motives to justify actions and the definition of what the character seeks to achieve at any given moment. So we're always saying, what does my character want? What does the character want right now? What is the task? What are they really trying to achieve? It can seem a little reductive on occasion, but it really helps in terms of a focus, as we shall see when we come to take his ideas and extrapolate them a little bit further into what it might mean about acting in general. And he suggests a whole range of potential exercises to help this search. But some of the ones that most people know and flag up, this little phrase called the magic if. If this were true for me, if I were in this circumstance, if, what if? Lovely little phrase. What if this were true? And always coming back and asking that question makes us, as actors, invest imaginatively in whatever the circumstance for our character may be. He also talks about emotional recall, something what I call associative emotional memory, by sort of saying, if we remember, if we can make an emotional connection to the circumstance and situation of the character we're playing, we may find something in our own lives that chimes with that, and we can draw on that to help make our portrayal of the character more believable. It is, I think, quite a danger zone for actors, and particularly for young actors, because it tends to make people try to generate emotional responses, and trying to generate emotion is always in danger of taking us to rather a surface and actually self-indulgent approach to acting, because in general terms in daily life we don't attempt to generate emotion. Emotion is something we recognize in ourselves, usually as reaction to an event or some destabilizing of our daily sort of status quo. But he also espoused the principle of action, that notion of tasks, and therefore reaction to other people's tasks, to finding obstacles that get in the way of maybe what we're trying to achieve. And that could only be achieved through kind of an active listening. He doesn't call it active listening, but he's certainly talking about the principle of to and fro between scene partners. The next slide, please, Sharon. Oh, another quick visual. This is the Moscow Art Theatre. And actually, when you look at it, it sort of looks incredibly kind of old-fashioned and a little bit municipal in that shot. In a very strange sort of, almost carbolic soap kind of way, and the sort of lightness of it. And we expect the darkened auditorium, which of course is what they had when they were performing. But there it is. That's the Moscow Art Theatre. It's had manifestations in various guises over the years, and has its own school now. Next slide, please. Yes, so Stanislavski, therefore, was in this saying actors will be searching. In a way, he's sort of going, we need to analyze the play text. We need to analyze it in depth. And he argued that the best analysis of a play is to take action in the given circumstances. So understanding what the circumstances of the play are, whether that's historical, social, political, domestic, whatever the circumstances are of the world of the play, we have to take that into account, and we have to look at how our characters behave within that circumstance. And make an assessment of why. And there are two kinds of analysis that we can undertake as actors these days in regard to any script from a Stanislavskian point of view. We can undertake the objective analysis that basically says, what do I say as a character about myself? And what do others say about me? And then make some evaluation as to which of those is really true, and which are the most crucial sort of bits of information we can get. And having mined a text for that information, and sometimes there's very little, sometimes there's a huge amount, we then add to that a subjective analysis, what we often refer to as the backstory of the character. So what can I research around the world of the play, anything political, social, cultural, within which the play is set? Or what can I imagine is happened to this character about the rest of their life up to this moment that will help give me understanding of what motivates my character to behave in certain ways, moment to moment. And that's an important way of thinking about how we can undertake analysis. It also, I think, highlights the fact that people think acting's sort of easy, and everyone says, oh, I could do that. It takes a huge amount of thought, research, depth, homework, outside the hours spent in the rehearsal room. And a sort of genuine hunger for inquiry that should really be bottomless. And I think the best actors will have that. Next slide, please, Sharon. A man, Johnny Depp. Many of whom people sort of like to think of Johnny Depp as one of those chameleon actors who likes to take some risks and is quite dangerous. And we know from his personal life, there's all kinds of things going on that potentially add to that. But an actor that actors often admire because he's an actor's actor in that way. So what we mean by that is anybody's guess. I mean, I think we could unpick it, but let's not right now. Let's move on from Johnny Depp, please, to the next slide. So what is it? This notion of acting. Acting. There are some associated words with the same etymology here. To act, and we've already seen, the notion of undertaking an act, undertaking a task, is something that Stanislavski made central to his definition of the work of the actor. And in doing so, it needs to be active. It's no good enough to say, when we're talking about our character, to say, what do I feel here? No, what am I doing? And what is the action that I am playing? And we talk about playing the action, play your action. As a director, I'm often asking actors all the time to help define, to redefine what they think their action is, and is it doing the job they want it to do? Not to determine it for them, but actors need to be making some choices about that. So we're making, in a way, when we analyze through a play, we're making a whole scheme of actions, almost like a kind of graph. What are we trying to achieve in the big term? What I think Stanislavski calls the super objective. What's our overarching driving motivation? The next one, let's go to the next one. The actor's job, yes, to play the game of theatre. And the game of theatre, every act of theatre is in one sense quite simply defined as there is a situation where A, the actor, impersonates B, the character, while C, the audience looks on. They constitute an act of theatre, and it doesn't matter where it happens, when it happens, how it happens. If those three things are going on at the same time, an act of theatre has been constituted. I won't go into lots of unpicking of that definition, but it's a very simple one and a very clear one, I think, for anyone to understand. So there is always that element of the actor and the character being combined in this single physical body. So next slide, please, Sharon. See it. There we go. In many of her roles. So Johnny, throwing in another one that most people will know and recognize and associate with. And both Johnny Depp and Meryl Streep, of course, started out as stage actors and did well in their respective areas before they moved into movies. Meryl Streep in particular spent a lot of time on Broadway and off-Broadway, once she came out of drama school. Next slide, please. Yes, so that word play, we talk about the act of play, doing the play. The word play is an interesting etymology again, but in most Western languages, the word to play a game and to do a play is the same. And we might talk about that, and we'll talk about it in a second. We have that phrase, we're doing the play, we're playing an instrument. We also know that most of us who work in our discipline know that we play theatre games, and a huge element of that and the element of play is to do with spontaneity and improvisation. So we're going to look at a few quick artifacts of play. Next slide. Yeah, some aspects of play here that are key. and that therefore I believe are absolutely key to the work of the actor, and things that we should aspire towards, to work with a sense of freedom and a lack of inhibition, to work creatively and imaginatively. Much play is creative and imaginative, it isn't all. And there are two fundamental types of games of let's pretend and role play. Hugely and invest in them. And for kids, just as it is for I believe it should be for actors, when we're playing the game, it's the best game in the world for the duration of the game. So it tells us something about how we have to focus and sort of put other things to one side. When we're training actors, one of the things we're really training is training back into socialized adults, the ability to find that freedom of play they had as young children. And that's an important thing to remember. Next slide, please, Sharon. And here's, look at that, the freedom of play. There we go. And so I suppose we could say, you know, we're talking about character. When we read character, we only character, that of your best friends, that of your parents or sibling, or that of someone just met, you only just met. That you will describe. If you asked your own mother, for example, to describe you, you would probably find there'd be all kinds of things that would be of your failings or your know you that well, or people who know you in certain circumstances can only describe your character in relation to that circumstance. And so the reading of character is not something that really is down to the actor. Once we've done our searching for clues, we're off and running. We can't make a judgment about character as we go. The audience will do that. Next slide, please, Sharon. Yeah. A little mantra that I have. We able to describe characteristics, say, of Hamlet, but if we come out and try to play being a prince and being Danish and being a student and being slightly depressed and a bit suspicious of his uncle, you know, it's going to look very surface. There are many other things about Hamlet that is different to that. And if it's surface and demonstrative, it's usually not believable. It's like putting on, you know, a cardigan and saying, I am, you know, or a hat saying, I am a witch. It's not the same. And the problem with that is, if we think we're playing character, and that's good acting, which is let's move on to the next slide. Nor can we ever be a character. However much we invest in a system and a process and identification, we cannot physiologically transform into somebody else. We are who we are, and our self is the instrument. We have to work. Also keep consciousness in the present tense of reality when we perform. I'm out of being Hamlet right now. Because I want to be able to stop and say, could somebody please call an ambulance? So there's something about, you know, we can't ever become a character. We may, however, be able to do the following. Next slide, please. Oh, look, there's the dressing up in the nativity play. And the next slide, please, Sharon. Yeah, we can inhabit the character. And inhabiting the character, we aim to make that character credible in the play's own circumstances for the duration of the play, from an audience perspective. They have to buy into what that character is and how they fit into the circumstances. We may identify and change our own circumstances to help inhabit believably. So we may be going, oh, I know this character, and we may do the thing, you know, famously, I think Robert De Niro saying, if I want to play somebody who's lived in a dustbin for 6 months, perhaps I need to go and live in a dustbin for 6 months. I don't think you need to do that. And the famous story of Dustin Hoffman and Laurence Olivier on the set of Marathon Man on the film, and Dustin Hoffman going, I've done all this preparation for this film and this is what I did, and Laurence Olivier turned around and said, why don't you try acting? And it's two polarities there, of course. The American method often does that thing of saying identify in a particular way, and people do go to extremes to maybe to change their appearance or their understanding. So next slide, please. So finally, yes, I mean, there are two final slides to come here. Things that I think we should remember. 3 little things that I always say to actors. This is that if you believe it enough, and actors should say this to themselves, if you believe it enough, then so will the audience. The more you invest imaginatively in the world of the play and believe your circumstance, then so will the audience. You can make audiences believe in anything that isn't apparent, that isn't physical, that doesn't exist, but they will buy it if you believe it. So however difficult the emotional stuff, if you are invested in it and you believe it, and it connects and it's genuine and it's organic and it's not forced, we will connect to it as an audience. Second thing to say is that listening is your focus. Listen with your whole self, and listen better is the thing I always say to myself as an actor. Don't get complacent. Don't think you've got it down. You never do. And every time you go out, you have to listen as if it's for the first time. And you need to keep honing that ability to listen with your whole self, your whole presence, your whole sense of corporeality in a live theatre with other actors. And finally, this was advice from Judi Dench. In a conversation I had with her just when I was head of acting at the Central School of Speech and Drama, and saying to her, what would be the advice you would give to young actors? And she said, there isn't really any advice about getting better other than to pretend harder. She came back to it being the game of let's pretend. That's what we're doing as actors. Pretend harder and believe it more, and then so will the audience. They'll go with you. So there's some little sort of key mantras I have. The final slide, no, 2 more slides, I think there are. One's a picture. Yeah, and there's Dame Judi. God love her. Yeah, and a fine actress she is too, but always a part of her still as herself is still inevitably and unmistakably Judi Dench. And the final slide, please, brings us back to Mr. Stan the Man, who had these 3 little things to remember, as he said it. Love, and things we sort of have often heard almost apocryphally as actors in our work. Love the art in yourself and not yourself in the art. In other words, strive to put yourself second and work to the good of the art form and good of the art of acting. If you do that, you will come up with some goods. There's a level of humility here and the negation of ego, whereas many people think that acting is about boosting your ego and being rather selfish. Remember, there are no small parts, only small actors. It's absolutely true. And actually often the small parts give you more freedom to be creative and imaginative than some of the bigger parts, which become an onerous task in terms of research and responsibility. And finally, unless the theatre can ennoble you as a human being, make you a better person, you should flee from it. And I genuinely have a great support and belief, to that little adage. I think we owe it to ourselves and to our audiences and to the theatre public, if you like, to know that we do it from a kind of selfless point of view, and that we do it in order to make the world a better place, not just myself a better person, but to make the world a better place, and for my process of discovery as an actor to help that. And that's it. It's one of those little lightning lectures that starts to connect all kinds of different concepts and bits of history and bits of theory. But I hope, for those of you who are, say, doing A-levels or anything like that, the notion that you can make a little bit more sense of Stanislavski in a practical way and put your sense of acting into slightly more complex and context, then I hope that will be of value to you. So thank you for listening. We will be doing more and add some more, I think, Sharon, for drama lunches as we go along. We'll find some other subjects and see what we do.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Nick. That was really, that's very, very interesting and great insight into the art of acting. So thank you for that. and I hope everyone's found that useful today. If you do think of any questions after the session, then of course, as I said, please do email us. The email address is at the bottom of screen, as you can see at the moment, outreach@ljmu.ac.uk. Many apologies for the technical issues I've had today. I don't know what's happening with the internet. Hopefully it will be better for me tomorrow. You can see on screen as well, we have some open days coming up shortly. The first one's on the 12th of June, so please do take a look at that web link there and have a little look and consider finding out more about drama, musical theatre, all of our Screen School courses, and of course every course we have across the university. You can see some of our pre-recordings on demand from previous events by looking at the on-demand virtual event page. You can see that link on screen as well. And our lightning lunch sessions are continuing right up until I think the end of this week or the end of next week. But again, have a look at that link for more information. So thank you very much again for joining us. Thanks, Nick, for that session. It was very useful. And we're going to end the session now. So thank you, everyone, and take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.